So what do you think of when you think of child protection or protecting vulnerable adults? Yeah, that's about the same thing I think of. And when we look in the Anglican Church and across many, many churches, we see that there are many child protection services. In the Anglican Church, this is called safeguarding, and it's for children, it's for vulnerable adults, it's for the elderly, and you could think, who could be against it? But just like the ideas of diversity and inclusion and equity, which mean one thing to a sensible person thinking about it and mean something completely evil to how it's being implemented, safeguarding within the Anglican Church, and probably now in many, many churches, is turning out to have exactly the opposite effect. One example of this is a chaplain from Trent College in Derbyshire in England by the name of Bernard Russell. And Bernard Russell was dragged before a bunch of agencies' investigations. Most recently, the Disclosure and Barring Service. Just who makes up these names? The Disclosure and Barring Service heard his case. And his case was this, that this rogue priest had, quote, the 51-year-old ordained Church of England chaplain was sacked by Trent College sacked, okay? This is before he went to these tribunals. They just sacked him immediately. Was sacked by Trent College after he preached a sermon to pupils in the school chapel in which he expressed the church's own official position on marriage and human sexuality and said that students did not have to agree with LGBTQ ideology. He said this in the chapel. They sacked him. But his bishop came to the rescue and said, no, his bishop actually threw him under the bus as well. The rot is deep. He had also expressed concerns about training provided in the school by LGBT charity Educate and Celebrate, in which staff were encouraged to chant, "Smash heteronormativity." That really rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Smash heteronormativity. For this, he was brought before the government's Anti-Terrorist program. Remember, he is a Christian minister telling children in a Christian school, within the chapel of the Christian school, what the church's teaching is on these subjects of LGBTQ and male-female relationships. And he has gotten way more than he expected. Well, you'll be happy to know that, quoting again, this commission, after consideration of your representations, we have decided it would not be appropriate to include your name on the children's barred list. Now, why did he ever make it this far? Why was he on the government's anti-terrorist program, which is called PREVENT, and also the Teaching Regulation Agency? They had to take a look at him because he was saying these things. And the problem was, you say, where's the safeguarding issue here? The safeguarding issue is, imagine that there was a trans child or a gay child in the school that had heard this. They weren't safe. You can't make it up. Now, despite him being acquitted, if you were, for saying these things, the Diocese of Derby carried out their own safeguarding inquiry into Reverend Randall, and they concluded that he posed a moderate risk to children. I mean, this is horror. This is horror. But be prepared to see more and more of it, and also in your own life. He was a moderate risk to children and vulnerable adults. Quoting the Christian Post here, bizarrely, the whole thing's bizarre, but okay, bizarrely, the diocese safeguarding team concluded that the church itself is a risk factor, and he is not being allowed to officiate in church services since. The diocese said he was a moderate risk. Now, we talked in the beginning here, what is safeguarding? You know, we know all about pedophile priests, and actually there are no more, pedophile priests than there are pedophile teachers and pedophile, all kinds of people. It's not higher with priests, but it just gets exposed. And these are the people you should be able to trust above anyone. And when they violate a sacred duty, then it's even worse. Okay, but it's not just the church that has these issues. But what the church is doing is, instead of doing what you should do, which is to have awake and aware and alert Christian men and women who ask questions about things and attend, the children's events at the church and ask questions and make sure that, a bunch of kids aren't just left alone with one person for an extended amount of time, just common sense stuff. It will not solve the problems of safeguarding for children or vulnerable adults by having more of the safeguarding that they're doing now. Clearly, this safeguarding is not safeguarding children. It's exactly the other way around, which is how the Christian Post ends their article on this. Quote, "Who are the extremists and real danger to children here?" Instead of defending Bernard, who had simply upheld the church's own teaching, the church authorities have refused to clear his name. This must now change. And that was said by Andrea Williams, chief executive of the Christian Legal Center, who took up his case. If this can happen to a chaplain in the chapel of an Anglican school, where the Church of England is the state church, what can happen to you and to me and to these kind of evil bureaucrats that come up? This safeguarding stuff has really just blossomed in the last few years. And interestingly, I have investigated this quite carefully. And we have numbers of abused children, for example, from before the safeguarding policies. But we do not have any numbers on children after the safeguarding policies. So we have no clue whether or not they are actually working. What we do have after the introduction of the safeguarding policies is nonsense like this in the church. So safeguarding, as far as I can tell, is simply driving the LGBTQ agenda. It is driven by that agenda within the church, and we need to stop it. If you look at what the church is spending money on, it's just these kinds of people in diocese, and these are the kinds of things they're doing with it. We're not protecting children, and you can't protect children. You can't protect people by the church council signing off on a sheet. You need to protect them by making the issues very clear within the church, and we need awake and aware and alert Christian people to make sensible decisions about where our children are and what is happening to them and what are the limits of authority. All of the issues that have come up within the Anglican Church have been unsupervised situations where we've had priests who many cases already had a bad record with children. And the hierarchy of the church covering up their eyes and saying, well, we're not really sure about this priest, so we'll put him over here, then we'll put him over there, and then we'll put him over here. And this rot is all through the church. The church is not going to solve this problem. Adult Christian men and women, that's where you will solve issues with safeguarding of children and vulnerable adults and the elderly. And this is just one more example of the world and the flesh and the devil that we have to fight against, not just in the world, but in the church itself. Nevertheless, we do need to acknowledge that the sins happening in the church are sins happening to people, and these are sins that happen to you and me as well. And I'd like to end this with my favorite little bit of Colossians that may give us some kind of hope and a little bit of direction. And this is from the NIV. It's chapter 3. Since then you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will also appear with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. Because of these, the wrath of God is coming. You used to walk in these ways in the life you once lived, but now you must rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its Creator. Here there is no Greek or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to peace, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom, and as you sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs with gratitude in your hearts to God. And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Now, there's a lot of love and forgiveness, and you think, wait a minute, you were all sort of teeth and claws there. But we have to understand that doing these things is really tough. Showing the love, showing wisdom. When is the last time you admonished a Christian? I've admonished some Christians in my life. Didn't turn out very well. You say, well, Peter, you're a nasty piece of work, and you shouldn't have been holding up your finger and admonishing people. Maybe, but I did it from a Christian standpoint, in Christian love, and with, not trying to get anything out of it, to the best of my knowledge. So it's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing to do. And we're not very good at it because we're not practiced. And I would encourage all of us, if we are going to be those awake and aware and alert people that can safeguard our children and our vulnerable people in our community and the elderly, those kinds of people, that's what we need. We need to have the courage to do what was just read in Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 to 17. So anyway, pray for me and pray for all those who struggle with all the things that were put in there with anger and rage and malice and heaven knows what other terrible things are out there. But we need to speak the truth into society, and there is a price to be paid, just as the Reverend Bernard Russell found out, and many others. He's not just the only one, but this popped up in the Christian Post, and I thought I'd share it with you. So pray for me, pray for the other Christians, and be awake and aware and alert in your church. Take responsibility for bringing the wisdom of God and His scriptures into your life and into your church. God bless.